Good evening. It's good to see all of you here this evening. And it's my pleasure to welcome you for some music. But I also have other reasons to thank you. I thank you because this project is meaningful to me, having been a couple of times to Uganda. And the children, if they could be here, would thank you. I get a call about once a month to talk by phone, Skype type of call. And they want to talk to Daddy Ken. And so that means a lot to me, that they think of me as someone that they look up to care for them. But I also thank you on behalf of the staff that work with the children every day to provide a safe home and schooling, a chance at life. And so we're here for a pretty important reason tonight. But before we get started, I do want to acknowledge a decision that was made by this young orchestra to take on a benefit concert on behalf of the Uganda orphanage. And you'll hear more about the orphanage tonight, but I just want to say a couple things about their decision to do this. First of all, this isn't the first time that they've done it on behalf of the children. In fact, the original, I think, impetus may have been when they gave a concert and someone asked, "What can we do for you?" Because they weren't charging. They said, "Well, you could support the orphanage." And that got things started. That was a single day, but the benefit concert from last year raised the orphanage walls about this time last year. Since then, there's been more progress that Moll will get to share with you. And that's something that they were doing, this orchestra was doing, because they wanted to be part of something that provided for those in need. The second reason I want to acknowledge the orchestra is because they're now providing you that are here, not just with wonderful music, but also with an opportunity to catch the same vision of supporting our world, particularly those who are in need in our world, and there are plenty. That opportunity is not something we should take lightly, because it helps us remember that being a benefactor brings as much joy and, in a way, its own benefit to each of us, even though we think we're the ones doing the helping. It blesses us. So, orchestra, thank you for giving us the opportunity to share in the joy that you're showing by being here tonight on behalf of the children and all of us. So as we begin our concert tonight, I'd like to have a word of prayer that this event will have the intended effect on all of us. Let's bow our heads. Father in heaven, we have opportunity to see your care for us and then offer that care for others. So we're here tonight to catch the vision that you have for us, because you know how it will bless all. In your economy, all benefit from good that is done. Please be with the orchestra members. Help them to show what they have practiced and learned. And may we see our opportunities. Amen.
It is so special to be here with all of you. We've been looking forward to this since last year's concert, and it has been such a wonderful evening with all of you here. And I want to share an update of what has happened in the year since we updated last, but I wanted to give you a little bit of an update about just a background of how we got where we're going. So I get asked a lot, how did you get started? How did you get involved with the organization? And the truth is that it kind of evolved over time. And where we are today is not something that we envisioned, but we keep stepping through the doors before us and the needs in front of us, and it has grown into a much bigger vision and much bigger project than we initially imagined. I have a background in disaster response and development work, and I initially got involved with the post-earthquake Haiti, and I made some very good friends there, and they kept asking if I would do more and help support education, and I was very busy and I was traveling a lot and I just didn't feel like I could. And it became evident that I would need to be a lot more involved if we were to do something. And finally, 4.5 years ago, in the spring, or about 4 years ago, spring of 2020, we started to lay the groundwork of what is now Educáre, which is the organization that we are now running. And it is a small team of volunteers that are now working in Haiti, Uganda, and Tanzania. And tonight we're mostly focused on Uganda because we are building an orphanage there, and the funds from tonight's event will go to support the building of that orphanage. But I also want to share a little bit about how the program got started and the other places that we're working. So initially I went to Haiti, and so my initial ties to the work that we were doing there started in Haiti. And so our project in 2020 was just Haiti. And we didn't have any funds, and so we tried to figure out what can we do with no money. And the thing that we came up with was tutoring. There are students that were not doing well in school, and we figured that if we could tutor them to place better on their national exams, which happened every 3 years, they would have more opportunities and they would be able to advance in their education. And so we found some volunteers to tutor them, and pretty soon those students had the top scores in their classes. They had the top scores on the national exams, and they were excelling in everything that we put in front of them. And from the beginning, we really wanted this to be something that instilled leadership in these students, because we saw such a need for stronger leadership in the country and around the world. And so from the beginning, we structured the programs so that the students would be involved in community service programs. They would problem solve needs in the community. They would tutor kids and mentor kids that were younger than them, and they had to keep their grades up. And as we have grown the program in Haiti, they have continued to excel in each initiative that we put in front of them. Well, in 2021, there was a lot of unrest in Haiti. The president was assassinated in July, and there was an earthquake that hit in August of 2021. And we were just doing education, but all of a sudden, there's a huge need all around us. We're working in the southern part of the country, and because of all the unrest, all of the large organizations that are working in Haiti have mandates that prevent them, and policies prevent them from actually responding in the disaster. And so we're seeing all of these people that are trapped on top of the mountains and in communities that have been completely leveled. And we decide to pivot and lean into the medical need that was in front of us. And so we organized a team of mostly Haitian medical students, doctors and nurses, and a few Marines that were willing to come in the midst of so much instability. And we visited these communities that had been impacted by the disaster. And we started doing medical clinics in village after village, hiking up and down the mountains day after day. And we did this for 2 months. And I just want to quickly share one of the stories of the people that we met in this initiative. And it's Slane. And she was someone that we met 9 days after the earthquake. And we had no idea how she was still alive because there really was no explanation for it. She was 6 years old and a cement wall had fallen on her and split her head open and her brain was exposed. And we were able to get her airlifted to a hospital in Port-au-Prince. And we had no idea how we were going to pay for the surgery, but we just knew that it's what needed to be done. And so we got her to the hospital, and they did a whole series of tests to see if she had brain damage and to see what the extent of the injury was. And in the process, they discovered that she had a brain tumor. And the brain tumor had protected her brain from the impact of the wall falling on her. And the wall falling on her had exposed the brain tumor that she wouldn't have known was there. And so we were able to get her surgery, and we got her to the hospital that happened to have the top brain surgeon in the country. And she went through the surgery. You can see her before the surgery, and then after. She looks perfect afterwards. And it was just one small miracle that we encountered that gave us more incentive to continue to serve in the communities that we were working in. And there were a total of 9 very critical patients that we ended up getting airlifted to Port-au-Prince. And as we continued to work in Haiti, we started to lean more into STEM education. And someone donated, at the end of 2020, someone had donated a robotics kit to us, and we didn't know how to use it, but we figured someone had donated it, we'll teach the kids how to use it, and we will see how they do. And then we ended up entering them into a competition, and they've just really excelled, and they're now representing the country of Haiti, and they're competing on an international stage, and it's grown so much bigger than what we had initially thought. But in the process of building that program in Haiti, I was approached by someone in Uganda that was caring for children. And this is Patty on the end there. He was an orphan himself, and he knew the impact that the care that had been given to him had had on his life. And there were 4 kids that showed up on his doorstep one day. They didn't have anywhere to live, and he said, I have to do something because I know what it is to be an orphan. And so he had been caring for kids, and then little by little, more and more kids showed up. And pretty soon he was caring for all of these children with no support. And he said, you know, I love what you're doing in Haiti with the robotics program and the education program. Is that something that you could come to Uganda and share that education program with our kids? And I started talking to him, and I really loved what he was doing, and I got to know some of the kids, and we helped sponsor some of their education. And the more we got to talking to them, the more I realized that they didn't have a safe place to live, and that needed to be solved before we did anything with education. And so yet again, we pivoted, and we decided to build an orphanage. And as you might imagine, this was much bigger than, we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. And so my dad agreed to help with this project. This is really his fault that this is where we're at. But we actually bought a piece of land sight unseen before we even went to Uganda for the first time. And they had given us a budget of what it was needed and everything, and we show up, and it was immediately obvious that this was never going to work. It was a very tiny plot of land that was smaller than this stage, and it was never going to be able to house all those children. And so we went back to the drawing board. We went to looking for pieces of land. This is the original drawing of the house. As you can see, it's a 3-bedroom house for all those children. It was just not going to quite work. So we found this piece of land, which is so beautiful, and we were able to purchase it on that first trip to Uganda. And this was our initial sketch of what the house would look like. And we had the gracious support of Bruce Butler, who's an architect here in this area. He redrew it for us, so it was much more up to scale of what we needed, and had taken into account all the different features that we were wanting for this. And then we started working through the plans for the build, and last year we broke ground, and we were able to put in a well and connect power to the land. And then in May, we started, this is a small caretaker building and then a latrine that's being built. This was almost 2 years ago now that went in. And this is the power getting connected to the land. And that's the water being the well that went in. This is the initial sketch of the land. It has changed a bit since then, and the orientation of the house is slightly different. But this gives you an idea of the layout of the property where we're building currently. And this is the house that the kids were living in. The back side of this house had 2 rooms that were 8 by 10, and all of the kids were sleeping on top of each other in this one room with dirt floors and no sanitation. And it was getting to be a more and more desperate situation because the landlord was trying to evict them because he wanted to turn it into a different type of property, and it was already lacking in sanitation. And so we felt like we couldn't wait for the orphanage to be completed. And so last January, we found a house to rent. This is the rooms they were in that house and the community that they were in. And we found this beautiful 4-bedroom house that we are currently renting for the kids to live in until we have the build completed. And it has been such a dream for them that they keep asking me when they're going to wake up from it. And I said, no, this is just the beginning. You haven't even seen the new house yet. And so they ask me over and over and over, what is the new house going to have, and what is it going to, and can we have grass at the new house? And I said, yes, the new house will not be completely paved. But for the first time in their lives, they each had a bed and a mattress and a blanket, which were all donated by some people that have been donors for this program. And this is also the build, the drawings for the house that we're currently building. And last June, we had a team of volunteers come out and help build the walls in the orphanage. We put the foundation in May, and in June, the walls went up. And it was such a special time to have all of the volunteers there with us. And then in February of this year, so it took us a while to raise the funds for the next stage. And so in February of this year, the roof went on, and now it really feels like a house, and like it's really coming together. And we have decided to do this in stages because we don't have all the funds up front, and so we did first the foundation, then we did the walls, then we did the roof, and the next stage is the windows and doors. And this is one of the kids seeing the house for the first time. There's a boarding school nearby, and several of the kids were able to go and see the house in person. And it was such a special experience to have them walk through the house and they were saying that they were going to get lost in there because it was so big. It was not as big as this room, but it's massive to them. And it's going to be able to house 60 children, and so once we fill it with 60 children, it's really not going to feel that big. But interestingly, their favorite room of the house is the dining room. And currently they eat on the floor, and they do their homework on the floor, and it is such an exciting thing for them to think about having tables and chairs for the first time in their life. And so we are going to have some beautiful hardwood tables made, and they are going to be in this room. This is Mukisa. He's one of the kids at our boarding school, and he's looking out the window to the property view that I showed you before. Also, the most beautiful view in the house. And so the kids are very, very excited about this space. But it's just so special to see them see something so simple, something that we don't even think about, and have it be the most amazing thing they can think of. Something else that we have done is teach sewing to the children, because we want them to have skills that they can use. And so we bought some treadle sewing machines, and the kids have been working to improve their skills with sewing. And they have learned to make clothes. They've made the dress that I'm wearing in that picture, and a number of other things that they wear all the time. It's a daily challenge to keep the kids in clothes and shoes and fed. And so we currently have about 30 children, and even in Uganda, where money goes a long ways, it still takes a lot to provide for them. And so a lot of our funds go towards new shoes and tuition and food for the children. And so that's an ongoing challenge. But it's also something that is never very far from their minds. They're constantly grateful for the fact that they get to complete their education, because up to this point they haven't had stability. So they've had some tuition, they've been in and out of classes, but as soon as the tuition fees run out, then they're sent home. And so there's a lot of interruptions, there's a lot of repetition of classes. And so for the first time, they're able to actually focus on learning and to not stress about whether they're going to be able to stay in school. And I asked the kids if they could ask for anything, what would it be? And almost all of them said tuition fees. If you could pay for school supplies and tuition fees, that's all that I could imagine. The kids also would love bicycles, and so I told them once we move to the property where there's a road and there's a place for them to be outside, we would love to get them bicycles, and they were ecstatic about that idea. Here are the kids getting new shoes, and here's us purchasing food. They make all the food themselves at the house, and all the kids participate in the running of the home. So we're able to do it with just a couple staff who are also volunteer, because the kids do so much of the work. Here are the kids doing art, kids getting ready for school. And we've also supported some other schools in the area. And this school, we have helped pay for a teacher and a blackboard and school supplies for these kids. This school is one of the schools that our kids go to, and it's a makeshift school that's been built out of recycled materials. And they had a fire last year, and so we helped to replace some of the materials needed for that. But all the kids are in need of something. And last year I was able to take a suitcase of used clothes that had been donated. And you would have thought that it was Christmas morning when I opened this suitcase and the kids each took something that they could have for themselves. And they have requested for me to help find sponsors for them, and I told them that I would see what I could do, but we're still trying to support the kids that we already have in our program. And so I'm always wanting to do more, and it's one of the challenges of not having unlimited funds. I would love to be able to do more, but we're doing the best we can with what we have. We were able to buy a vehicle for the home so the kids can be driven back and forth to school, and that has been a huge blessing. These are the kids at that same school. This is also that school that's made out of recycled materials, and when it rains, it just turns to mud there. But they haven't had, until last year, they didn't have water at this school. And one of our donors heard that they didn't have water, and they requested to pay for connecting water. And it took us months, but we did eventually get water connected there. And so they don't have to go all day without water, which has been amazing. The dress I'm wearing today was made by some of the girls in our tailoring program. And I showed them a picture, and they made it in one day from a picture. And I just gave some verbal modifications to add pockets, of course, and sleeves. And they have really shown how much their skills have improved over the time that they've been in the program. So in Tanzania, we have a little bit more formal program for tailoring that's specifically focused on girls who are at risk, who are child brides or they're teen moms, or there's some reason why they're not in school. A lot of them live on the streets. And so we wanted to give them skills that they could support themselves. And we thought, well, we could teach them sewing. And so they are in a 6-month program. And at the end of that program, they make uniforms for kids at local schools that don't have uniforms and can't afford them. And I was in Africa in March of this year, and we visited a school that the girls had made uniforms for. And it's at a Maasai village, and the Maasai are a nomadic tribe that haven't had a lot of stability access to education, and so it's not a huge part of their culture, and so any interruption in that is another barrier for the kids to have education. And so we decided that we were going to drill a well at this school, and that has been a saga that was almost 10 months in the making. But as of last week, we hit water, and we had all the authorities there to determine the depth and the sustainability of this well. And so the kids now don't have to walk miles a day to get water, and they can be in school. So we also made uniforms for the kids at the school where we drilled the well. And these are some of the uniforms that they were wearing before, and these are the kids that received the new uniforms. And you can see there's a little girl in the front that has her torn sweater, and she was gifted a pair of shoes that didn't fit one of the other kids, and so she was so thrilled to be included in the picture as well, even though she didn't get a full uniform. These are the girls in our tailoring program that made the uniforms. And we also rented a storefront now for the girls to start their business and to be able to have customers find them. And I had asked them to make things that we could sell to help support the program, but they've been so busy with their customers that they haven't had any time to make anything, which is a beautiful thing to see that their business is thriving. And so they're there with all their babies, and the neighbor kids, and everyone hangs out there, and they're doing really well. This is the kids collecting water in the village where we drilled the well. And these are the elders in the village that we met with. And I could be here all night telling you stories of our programs. And this day in particular was one of the most incredible experiences to meet them and hear from them and hear what an impact this was making in their village, and to share culture and to share the commonality that we have in wanting to support children. Children are a real gift for the Maasai people, and so helping support their children meant a lot to them. And this is the drill rig that's drilling the well out there. And this if it will play, is when they hit water and the kids were all singing. They waited all morning to see the water, and they're praising Jesus for the access to water here. And that's the village chairman. I just want to share a couple more stories. Edith and Jennifer are two children that showed up on our doorstep last year that were orphaned and they didn't have anywhere to go. And we had started a tailoring program in their village, because we have 3 programs actually that are teaching tailoring skills. And they knew that we had children in our care. And so you can only imagine the desperation that it would take to send a 6 and 7-year-old on a bus for 2 hours by themselves to a location they've never been to in the middle of the night. And so we weren't looking to take in more children, but they showed up on our doorstep and we couldn't turn them away. And so now we have 2 more girls in our program that are thriving. This is them now, and they are in school. They couldn't read or write, and now to hear them saying their numbers and letters and reading is just really incredible, and their English is really good in just a year. So they're thriving. Isaac was kind of the catalyst for our work in Uganda. He was severely burned and needed immediate help, and I again didn't know how we were going to find the support for him, but we got him to a hospital, and within 24 hours of sharing his story, the funds came in to provide for his care. And it gave me some insight into how much this community cares and how much support there can be for these children. And so we've been able to get him 3 surgeries now, and he's doing really, really well. And he's also in school. Baby Blessing is someone that we came across last August. She was a newborn baby that was abandoned, and we got word that she needed support. So we ended up locating her mother. She's a teen mom who had nowhere to go, and she was in labor, and she went door to door in the slum that she was living in, and everyone locked their doors and said, "You can't have your baby here because then we'll be responsible for your baby and you, and we can't even feed our own children." And so we asked her if she was wanting to care for the baby, and she said, "Yes, I just have nowhere to go." And so we ended up renting a space, a room for her to care for her baby, and the plan is for her to come and work for us once she's able to do that. And this was last week. This is Baby Blessing. So her mom named her Blessing because what was her darkest day turned out to be an incredible blessing in her life. And she also asked me to name the baby, and I named her Amara, which means mercy. And this is baby Aaron. This was just a couple weeks ago. I got a message saying that there was a 7-month-old baby that couldn't sit up and couldn't talk and was completely lethargic, malnourished, and needed support. And so we were able to get him within 24 hours. Someone stepped forward and wanted to sponsor him. We were able to get him to a doctor. We got him therapies. We improved his diet, and he's now sitting up. And his mom was able to get a job at a restaurant recently, and so she's able to care for him. And so I just wanted to share some of the numbers that have gone into the Uganda project specifically. This is not all of the work that we're doing, but the construction of phases 1 and 2, the roof, the foundation, the walls, and the roof was $83,000, and we have put in a total of about $233,000 into this program. And all of the funds for the work that we have done has come from friends and family and friends of friends. And some days it feels like it's really slow, and then I stop and look back at what we've done in the last 4.5 years. And it's incredible to see how many kids have been impacted and how many kids are in school and the progress that we've made on some of the building projects. And all of that has been because of the generosity of people like you who are here tonight because you care and you want to support work that's being done in different places and the kids that we are serving in Uganda. For a child's education, it's about $350, but for their total sponsorship, including housing and food, is about $1,000 a year. And so our annual expenses for Uganda right now, including the rent payments for the home, is about $29,000. And so to complete the build, we're still about $103,000 short of completing the build. So this is what's needed for the next phase, windows and doors, $20,000, and then we will finish with the interior, the tiling, the electrical, plumbing. So still a ways to go, but when we look back at how much we've accomplished in the last year, it's really incredible to see how far we've come and the effort that's been put into getting us where we are now. There's a young doctor, her name is Nabiela, that she's at the home right now with the children, and she is a refugee from South Sudan, and she is far from her family, and she is unable to connect with them right now, but we were able to give her a place to stay, and she wrote me this yesterday, and she said that these young girls have such big dreams for the world to contain. I'm so happy because I've come to realize that happiness is not found in money, as we've always believed. Those who have lost something often give the most generously. How beautiful and simple they are. Their lives are so humble, yet filled with hope. They want to succeed. Some dream of becoming doctors, others engineers, and some fashion designers. Thank you for always reminding me to be grateful for everything I have in my life. And that truly, God has given me so much gratitude. She is currently teaching the kids hygiene and how to wash their hands and brush their teeth and reading to them and working with them. And so it's been really sweet to see that she is spending her time, even though she's not where she wants to be and she's far from her family. She's using what she has to share with the kids that she's living with right now. And I like this quote that says, what you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make. So I'm so grateful for everyone who's here tonight, for the musicians who have given their time and talents to support this work, and for everyone who made this evening possible, including the Town Hall and the Freeport Performing Arts Center. And it really feels like a full circle moment for me because when I was their age, these students who are performing, we used to do performances, very, very small little concerts at nursing homes and churches and different places in the community. And any money that we received, we sent to an orphanage in Zimbabwe that our friends were running. And I was later able to go and help build that orphanage and move the children in. And now these students approached me wanting to support the work that I'm now doing in Uganda. And it's just such a beautiful thing to see that come full circle and have them want to give back in such a meaningful way. We do have, in the lobby where you came in, you saw all those baskets and handicrafts. All the fabric items were made by the girls in our program, the students in our program, and all of everything on those tables was made by people in the community. So if you want to help support our work, you want to take something home that will remind you of the work that's being done in Uganda and Tanzania, and just one more way that you can help support this work, we'd love for you to check out those tables after the concert. But I just wanted to thank you so much for being here tonight.
So thank you again for being here this evening, and I wanted to leave you with a verse. James 1:27 says, "Pure and genuine religion in the sight of God the Father means caring for the orphans and widows in their distress and refusing to let the world corrupt you." Let's bow our heads. Father, we're thankful that we've been here. We're thankful that you give us opportunity to make a difference. And we're thankful that you give us the strength to do so in this world. Please go with us that we may continue to act as your hands and feet in a world in need. We ask in your name. Amen. Amen.